Hi everyone! Welcome to the Body Swapping Stories YouTube channel. Please subscribe to get notifications when new stories come out. Let us know in the comments below of what you think of this story. Enjoy!
Have you ever loved someone so much you'd do anything to save them? What if saving them meant becoming them? What if a magical being offered you the chance to live on in your partner's body after a tragedy took you both? My name is Elijah, and at 27, I'm living paycheck to paycheck in a shared flat, working 2 part-time jobs just to survive. Most evenings, I'm gaming or reading fantasy novels online because fictional worlds are more interesting than my reality. That's how I ended up on a language exchange app. Most conversations went nowhere until Aiko messaged me about fantasy books. She was 25, from Tokyo, working at a translation company. When we moved to video calls, I was struck by her gentle voice and kind smile. Over months of daily conversations, we fell completely in love. We talked about books, dreams, our desire to have children soon. The distance became unbearable, so I saved for over a year to visit her in Tokyo. I stayed with her for 3 months. When it was time to leave, I couldn't handle the separation. "Come back with me," I said. She agreed without hesitation. We flew back together, got married at the courthouse, and started trying for a baby immediately. Within a month, she was pregnant. We were broke but happy, living in one room while saving for our own place. Unknown to us, our love had attracted a benevolent fairy named Aloy, who watched our union in silence. At 5 months pregnant, we took our first vacation to a seaside town. A typhoon hit our second night with devastating force. The building collapsed, debris crushing both of us. I was dying, my lungs crushed. Aiko lay beside me, blood running down her face, not responding. That's when Aloy appeared, beautiful and otherworldly, made of starlight and mist. "Your love has drawn my attention," she said. "Both of you are dying, but your child lives. Your wife's body survives, but her consciousness has passed. I can transfer your soul into her form." Faced with death and our unborn child's fate, there was no choice. "Do it," I whispered. "Save our baby." Everything went white. When I opened my eyes, I was on a stretcher, paramedics working around me. But they were talking about the pregnant woman. I tried to sit up and immediately felt the difference. The weight on my chest, my pregnant belly, hair falling around my shoulders. When I touched my face, the features were smaller, more delicate. Aiko's features.
"She's conscious," a paramedic shouted. "Ma'am, you're okay. Your baby's heartbeat is strong." I opened my mouth and Aiko's voice came out. "My husband," I said. "Where is my husband?" "I'm sorry, ma'am. He didn't make it." The medical team was stunned that Aiko had woken from brain death. To them, it was a miracle. To me, it was the beginning of living as someone I'd never been. The first few weeks were hell. I was in the hospital for observation, and every moment reminded me how different everything was. My voice sounded completely foreign, not just higher, but with Aiko's accent, her way of forming words. When I tried to speak, it felt like someone else's mouth moving. The first time I was alone, a nurse helped me to the bathroom. I caught my reflection in the mirror and nearly fainted. The face looking back was Aiko's, her dark eyes, her small nose, her gentle features, but it was my consciousness behind those eyes, trying to process this impossible reality. Standing there in the hospital gown, I slowly lifted it to see the body I now inhabited. Breasts that were fuller from pregnancy, the curved belly where our child was growing, everything smaller and softer than I had ever been. I touched my face with hands that were more delicate, fingers that were longer and thinner than mine had ever been. This was who I was now, forever. Aiko's parents, Kenji and Mariko, flew in from Japan within days. Seeing them walk into my hospital room was devastating. They rushed to hug me, crying with relief that their daughter had survived. "We thought we'd lost you," Mariko sobbed, stroking hair that felt completely foreign on my head. "The doctor said you were brain dead," Kenji added, his voice breaking. "We were preparing to say goodbye." To them, I was Aiko, traumatized by the accident, mourning the loss of my beloved husband. They had no idea they were comforting that husband while grieving their actual daughter. The irony was crushing. "I'm so sorry about Elijah," Mariko whispered. "He was such a wonderful man. He loved you so much." I started crying, but the tears felt different, more intense, more overwhelming than I'd ever experienced. "He did love me," I managed to say, which was true in the most twisted way possible.
They stayed for weeks, helping me through the grief and the remainder of the pregnancy. Every conversation was torture. They'd share memories of Aiko's childhood, tell stories about her growing up, ask if I remembered this or that family event. I had to pretend, nod along, act like their daughter who was actually dead. Learning to exist in this body was a daily struggle. Everything felt wrong initially. The way I walked was different. My center of gravity had shifted completely with the pregnancy, but even beyond that, my hips were wider, my stride naturally shorter. I kept bumping into things because I misjudged where my body ended. Getting dressed was an ordeal. Aiko's maternity clothes fit this pregnant form, but wearing them felt like playing dress up in someone else's costume. Bras were the worst. I'd never had to deal with anything like that, and now I needed supportive ones for breasts that were preparing to nurse a baby. My emotional responses were completely different too. I cried more easily, felt things more intensely. Whether it was pregnancy hormones or something about inhabiting a female body, everything seemed amplified. A sad commercial could make me sob for 20 minutes. The pregnancy continued, and I had to learn to navigate prenatal appointments, birthing classes, all the preparations for becoming a mother. Kenji and Mariko helped with everything, still believing they were supporting their daughter through this difficult time. "Aiko, you're being so strong," Mariko would tell me during doctor visits. "Elijah would be so proud of how you're handling everything." Those words cut deep every time. I was Elijah, and I was proud of how I was handling it, but I could never tell her that. As the pregnancy progressed, I slowly started adapting to this body. Taking a shower became less jarring as I got used to the different proportions, the way water felt on this skin. I learned to manage the longer hair, figuring out how to wash it properly, how to keep it out of my face. After months of physical and emotional adjustment, I went into labor at 38 weeks. The experience was unlike anything I could have imagined. The pain was intense, but it was the emotional overwhelm that really got to me. This body knew what to do even when my mind was panicking. When the contractions started, I felt completely out of control. My body was doing things I'd never experienced, responding to instincts I didn't understand. Mariko held my hand through most of it, coaching me through breathing techniques while I squeezed her fingers until they turned white.
"You're doing so well, sweetheart," she kept saying. "Just breathe through it. Your baby is almost here." The moment the doctor placed our son in my arms, everything else fell away. Haruki, the name Aiko and I had chosen together, meaning shining brightly. He was perfect, tiny and red and screaming, but absolutely perfect. Looking at his face for the first time, I broke down completely. This was the baby we'd both wanted so desperately, the child we dreamed about during those long video calls when we were still an ocean apart. He had Aiko's delicate features, but my stubborn jawline, eyes that could have belonged to either of us. "He's beautiful," I whispered, and for the first time since the swap, my voice felt like it belonged to me. The first few months of motherhood were overwhelming in ways I'd never anticipated. Not just the sleepless nights and constant feeding schedule, but learning to care for a baby while still adjusting to being in a woman's body. Breastfeeding was particularly surreal. This body produced milk, responded to Haruki's cries with physical reactions I couldn't control. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night with my shirt soaked because I'd heard him stirring in his crib. It was biological programming I'd never experienced, instincts that felt both foreign and natural. Kenji and Mariko stayed for 2 months after Haruki was born, helping with everything from diaper changes to grocery shopping. Having them there was both a blessing and a constant reminder of the deception I was living. "You're such a natural mother," Mariko would say, watching me feed Haruki. "I always knew you'd be wonderful with children." But I wasn't Aiko being a natural mother. I was Elijah learning to be a mother in Aiko's body, figuring out how to care for our son while living as someone I'd never been. After they returned to Japan, I was alone with Haruki for the first time. The silence in the apartment was deafening after weeks of having help. It was just me and this tiny person who depended on me for everything, and I had to figure out how to be his mother while still learning how to be a woman. Several months after Haruki was born, my body had recovered from pregnancy and childbirth. I was slimmer now, but curvier than I'd been while pregnant. Looking at myself in the mirror after a shower, I could see the changes. My waist was smaller, my hips were wider, my breasts were fuller from nursing. This was what people might call a classic post-pregnancy figure.
I started paying more attention to how I dressed. Initially, I just grabbed whatever was practical from Maiko's wardrobe, but now I found myself considering how different outfits looked on this body. There was something about wearing a dress that fit well or choosing a top that flattered my figure that made me feel more confident when I took Haruki out for appointments or errands. To my surprise, I discovered I was drawn to certain items in ways I'd never expected. There was something unexpectedly pleasant about wearing skirts. The way they moved when I walked, how they felt against my legs. Well-fitting bras had gone from torture devices to something that actually felt supportive and comfortable. Even some of the lingerie I found in Aiko's drawers intrigued me, though I wasn't ready to examine those feelings too closely. As a full-time mother, I was constantly out and about. Pediatrician appointments, grocery shopping, trips to the park with Haruki and a stroller. These outings became lessons in how differently the world treated me now. At the grocery store, cashiers would coo over Haruki and tell me what a beautiful baby I had. "You must be so proud," they'd say. And I was, but in a way they could never understand. Other mothers at the park would strike up conversations about sleep schedules, feeding routines, developmental milestones. They'd compliment my outfits or ask where I'd gotten Haruki's adorable little shoes. I found myself actually enjoying these interactions, feeling included in a community of women in ways I'd never experienced. But there were also interactions that left me feeling conflicted. Men would sometimes try to start conversations when I was out with Haruki, complimenting what a good mother I seemed to be or how lucky my husband was. Part of me knew I wasn't supposed to feel flattered by this attention,
but I couldn't help the small thrill when someone noticed me positively. The strangest part was how natural it started to feel. After months of living in this body, moving through the world as Aiko, some things began to feel automatic. I stopped thinking consciously about how to walk in this form, how to modulate my voice, how to gesture with these more delicate hands. But with that growing comfort came a deeper identity confusion. I missed Aiko desperately, not just as my wife, but as the person whose life I was now living. I was wearing her clothes, being called by her name by everyone who'd known her. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering what she would have done in a particular situation, how she would have handled Haruki's fussiness or a difficult day. The loneliness became overwhelming. I was raising our son alone, carrying secrets that no one could ever know. Everyone saw me as Aiko, the widow who'd lost her beloved husband. No one knew that the husband was still there, trapped in his wife's body, grieving for both his old life and for the woman whose place he'd taken.
One evening, about 6 months after Haruki was born, the weight of everything crashed down on me. I'd put him to bed after a particularly difficult day. He'd been cranky and wouldn't nap, I was exhausted, and I felt completely isolated from any kind of adult connection. Lying in bed that night, overwhelmed by grief and loneliness, I found myself needing to unwind in ways I'd been avoiding. What started as trying to relax became something more intimate. I ended up giving myself some much-needed attention for the first time since the swap, and the experience was completely different from anything I'd known as a man. More intense, more emotional, involving my entire body in ways I'd never experienced. The tension built slowly, washing over me in waves that seemed to go on forever. Afterward, I lay there feeling a complex mix of guilt and relief. Guilty because it felt like I was taking advantage of Aiko's body for my own needs, but also relieved because for those few minutes, I'd felt completely present in this form instead of constantly mourning what I'd lost. It became a regular way of working through stress after that. Not daily, but often enough. A way to deal with pressure and isolation, to feel connected to this body that was now mine. To remind myself that I was still alive and capable of feeling good even when everything else felt impossible. The routine wasn't just about physical comfort. It was about accepting that this was my body now, that these sensations and responses were part of my reality. I learned what brought me satisfaction, how to handle myself in ways that provided relief, how to reach that special place in this feminine form. Around Haruki's first birthday, something unexpected happened that changed everything. I received a phone call about a lottery ticket I'd supposedly purchased months earlier. A significant win, not life-changing money, but enough to stop worrying about rent and groceries, enough to buy a proper flat where Haruki could grow up. "Are you sure this is right?" I asked, confused. I don't remember buying any lottery tickets. "The ticket was purchased several months ago," the lawyer explained. "Your name and information are clearly on our records."
I should have questioned it more, but I was too grateful for the financial relief to look too closely at unexpected good fortune. Within weeks, I'd quit worrying about money for the first time in my adult life. What I didn't know was that Alloy was secretly ensuring we were looked after, making sure her intervention had led to something good for both of us. The fairy who'd saved our child's life was still watching over us, providing the stability we needed. With financial security came the freedom to focus entirely on being Haruki's mother. I found a beautiful 2-bedroom flat in a family-friendly neighborhood with a park nearby and good schools for when he got older. For the first time since the swap, I felt like I was building something that was truly mine. As Haruki grew from a baby into a toddler, I continued changing too. Living as a woman for over a year had shifted something fundamental in how I moved through the world. I was more comfortable in dresses and skirts than I'd ever imagined possible. I'd learned to do my makeup properly, to style my hair in ways that flattered my face. The transformation wasn't just physical. My emotional responses had evolved too. I was more empathetic, more intuitive about Haruki's needs, more connected to other mothers in our neighborhood. Whether it was hormonal changes from inhabiting a female body or just adapting to motherhood, I felt things more deeply than I ever had as a man. When other parents complimented how well-adjusted Haruki seemed, how patient and nurturing I was with him, I felt genuine pride. I was good at this. I was a good mother, even if I'd never expected to be one, even if I was doing it in a body that hadn't been mine originally. These private moments had evolved too. What started as stress relief had become something more integrated into my routine. I'd learned exactly how this body responded, what hit the right spots, how to get there efficiently or take the scenic route, depending on what I needed. Recently, I'd even invested in some new tools to help with the job. They made the whole process more efficient and satisfying, though I kept them well hidden from any visitors. It wasn't shameful anymore. It was personal time, a way of staying in touch with my own needs while caring for a demanding toddler. Sometimes it was a quick session after a long day. Sometimes it was a longer deep dive that still amazed me with its intensity. But despite how comfortable I'd become with managing my own needs, I wasn't ready to let anyone else into this space. The thought of another man getting his hands on what had been Aiko's felt wrong. Maybe someday I'd be ready to open that door, but not yet. For now, I was perfectly capable of handling things myself.
By Haruki's second birthday, I realized I'd been living as Aiko longer than I'd known her as my wife. The woman in the mirror felt familiar now, comfortable. Her reflection was becoming my reflection in ways that went beyond just getting used to the appearance. I still missed my old life sometimes, still grieved for the man I'd been. But increasingly, I felt grateful for this second chance. I was raising our son, experiencing motherhood, living a life that was meaningful even if it wasn't the one I had expected. 3 years after the swap, I made a decision that had been weighing on my mind for months. Kenji and Mariko had been asking when I would bring Haruki to visit them again. They missed him terribly since returning to Japan and wanted to spend proper time with their grandson in their home country. The thought of seeing them on their home turf terrified me. They'd want to show me places from Aiko's childhood, take me to her old school, visit family graves. They'd expect emotional responses and memories that belonged to their daughter, not to me. But Haruki deserved to know his grandparents better, and they deserved to have him visit. "We're going to visit Grandma and Grandpa," I told Haruki one morning as he played with his toys. "Japan," he said excitedly, having heard me talk about the trip for weeks. As I packed our suitcases, I caught myself in the bedroom mirror trying on different outfits for the trip. Comfortable clothes for the long flight, casual outfits for spending time with Haruki, nicer clothes for dinners with Kenji and Mariko. The woman in the reflection was undeniably beautiful, undeniably feminine, undeniably a devoted mother. She looked nothing like the man I'd been born as, but she was who I was now, who I'd become through impossible circumstances,
but who felt more real and authentic with each passing day. This was my life. This was who I'd become. And despite everything, the grief, the confusion, the constant deception, I was grateful to be alive, grateful to be raising our son, grateful for this second chance at existence, even if it meant living forever as someone I'd never expected to be.